My wife declared, "I need to find myself. Moving in with my life coach." I replied, "Safe travels." Then I discovered her life coach was actually married, so I mailed his wife a welcome basket with all their romantic texts printed out. 4 days later, my wife was homeless and her coach was getting divorced. I, 34 stared at my wife across our kitchen table as she delivered what she probably thought was the most profound statement of her adult life. She needed to find herself, she explained, and this journey of self-discovery required her to move in with her life coach. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, visible, toxic, and impossible to ignore. My coffee grew cold as she outlined her plan with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a vacation to Europe. She had been seeing this life coach for 3 months, she said, and he had opened her eyes to possibilities she never knew existed. According to her, our 12-year marriage had become a cage that prevented her authentic self from emerging. She needed space to grow, to breathe, to become the woman she was meant to be. I asked her if she realized how this sounded. She brushed off my concern with a wave of her hand, insisting that I was being narrow-minded and traditional. This was about personal growth, not romance. Her life coach understood her in ways that I apparently never could. He saw her potential where I only saw limitations. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 12 years, I had supported every dream she chased. When she wanted to go back to school for her psychology degree, I worked overtime to cover our expenses. When she decided she hated psychology and wanted to try real estate, I celebrated her career change. When real estate didn't fulfill her either, I encouraged her exploration of art therapy. Now, apparently, I was the obstacle preventing her self-actualization. I told her to have safe travels. The simplicity of my response clearly wasn't what she expected. She had probably prepared for tears, arguments, maybe even begging. Instead, I wished her well on her journey of self-discovery and asked when she planned to move out. She packed her bags that weekend with the methodical efficiency of someone who had been planning this moment for weeks. I watched from our bedroom window as she loaded her car, wondering how many conversations she had already had with her life coach about this exact scenario. The way she moved suggested this wasn't a spontaneous decision born from our kitchen table conversation. After she left, our house felt different, not necessarily empty, but charged with possibility. For the first time in months, I could think clearly without the constant undercurrent of her dissatisfaction polluting every interaction. I realized I had been walking on eggshells for longer than I cared to admit. My curiosity about her life coach grew stronger over the following days. She had mentioned his name several times during her departure speech, referring to him with the reverence typically reserved for religious figures or celebrity mentors. I decided to do some research. Finding him online took less than 10 minutes. His website showcased a man in his early 40s with perfectly styled hair and the kind of confident smile that suggested he had never encountered a problem he couldn't solve. His bio described his expertise in helping individuals break free from limiting relationships and discover their authentic selves. The testimonials read like conversion stories from people who had found salvation through his guidance. What caught my attention wasn't his professional credentials or his inspirational messaging. It was the wedding ring clearly visible in several of his promotional photos and the family picture tucked discreetly in the corner of his About page. His wife appeared to be a pleasant woman in her late 30s, standing beside him with 2 young children who couldn't have been older than 8 and 10. I spent the next hour digging deeper into his digital footprint. His social media presence painted the picture of a devoted family man who frequently posted about date nights with his wife and weekend adventures with his children. His most recent post, dated just a week ago, celebrated his 10th wedding anniversary with a lengthy tribute to his wife's patience and support. The contradiction was fascinating. Here was a man who professionally advocated for people to leave limiting relationships while simultaneously maintaining the public image of a committed husband and father. Either he was the world's biggest hypocrite, or his definition of finding oneself came with very selective applications. My wife had left her laptop behind in her rush to begin her new life. She had always been careless with technology, leaving devices unlocked and passwords saved across multiple browsers. Her email account opened with a single click. What I discovered in her inbox made my coffee taste bitter. Months of correspondence stretched back to early spring, long before she had announced her need for self-discovery. The emails started professionally enough, scheduling sessions, discussing goals, sharing recommended reading materials. But by late summer, the tone had shifted dramatically. He wrote about feeling an instant connection with her during their first session. She responded that she had never met anyone who understood her so completely. He confessed that he looked forward to their sessions more than any other part of his week. She admitted that she had been having dreams about him. By September, they were exchanging messages multiple times per day. He told her that she deserved better than a marriage that stifled her potential. She agreed that I had never truly seen her for who she was. He suggested that sometimes the universe brings people together for purposes beyond conventional understanding. She said she believed they were meant to find each other. The most recent exchange, dated just 2 days before her kitchen table announcement, included detailed plans for her to move into his guest room while she figured out her next steps. He assured her that his wife wouldn't mind, as she was very understanding about his work helping people through life transitions. My wife expressed excitement about finally taking control of her destiny. I printed every email, text message, and social media interaction I could find between them. The stack of papers grew thick enough to require multiple binder clips. The evidence painted a clear picture of an affair disguised as spiritual guidance, with my wife as both the willing participant and the convenient victim of his practiced manipulation. His wife deserved to know what her understanding husband was doing while helping people through their life transitions. I spent an evening crafting a care package that would properly introduce her to her husband's extracurricular activities. The welcome basket I assembled was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive artistry. I included a nice bottle of wine, some gourmet chocolates, and a handwritten note explaining that I thought she should know about the wonderful work her husband was doing with his clients. The printed emails and text messages were organized chronologically in a beautiful leather binder, complete with sticky notes highlighting the most interesting passages. I also included screenshots of their social media interactions, printed photos from my wife's phone showing their coffee dates and afternoon walks, and a timeline I had created showing how their professional relationship had evolved into something much more personal. Everything was presented with the same attention to detail that my wife had always appreciated in my work projects. The package was delivered to his office on a Tuesday morning with a request that it be forwarded to his home address. I imagined his secretary placing it carefully on his desk, perhaps admiring the thoughtful presentation before adding it to his daily mail pile. Wednesday passed quietly. Thursday brought the first signs that my care package had reached its intended recipient. My wife called me in tears, barely coherent as she tried to explain that there had been a terrible misunderstanding. Her life coach's wife had somehow gotten the wrong impression about their professional relationship and had created a scene at his office. I expressed sympathy for their situation and asked if there was anything I could do to help. She said she would call me back once things settled down. Friday morning brought another call, this one significantly more panicked. Her life coach had asked her to find somewhere else to stay while he dealt with what he described as a temporary family crisis. She had nowhere to go and wondered if she could come home just until she figured out her next move. I reminded her that she had been very clear about needing space to find herself and suggested that this might be an excellent opportunity for that self-discovery to continue. Perhaps she could stay with one of the friends who had been so supportive of her journey. She broke down completely then, admitting that most of our mutual friends had been less supportive than she had expected. They had apparently found her decision to leave our marriage for her life coach difficult to understand, particularly since several of them had been through their own marriage counseling and recognized the inappropriate boundary crossing that had occurred. By Saturday, she was staying in a budget motel on the other side of town, calling me every few hours with updates on her deteriorating situation. Her life coach was no longer returning her calls. His wife had filed for divorce and taken their children to stay with her sister in another state. His office had received several complaints from other clients who had seen the coverage of his personal drama in the local newspaper. The newspaper article had been a delightful surprise. Apparently, his wife had decided that the community should know about her husband's unprofessional conduct with his clients. The story ran with the headline, "Local Life Coach's Personal Life in Shambles," and included quotes from his wife about the betrayal she felt upon discovering his affairs disguised as professional guidance. The article mentioned that this hadn't been his first inappropriate client relationship, just the first one that had been documented so thoroughly. Several other former clients had come forward with similar stories of boundary violations and emotional manipulation. The state licensing board had opened an investigation into his practices. My wife's calls became increasingly desperate as her situation continued to deteriorate. The motel was expensive, and her part-time job at the art therapy center barely covered her basic expenses. Her life coach had stopped all contact, apparently focusing on salvaging what remained of his professional reputation and his relationship with his children. She asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss the possibility of reconciliation. I agreed to meet her at the same cafe where she had apparently spent so many afternoons with her life coach, planning her escape from our limiting marriage. She looked terrible. Her journey of self-discovery had aged her in ways that 12 years of marriage never had. Her eyes were red from crying, her hair was unwashed, and she wore the same clothes she had been wearing for the past 3 days. The confident woman who had announced her need for space and growth had been replaced by someone who looked lost and defeated. She apologized for everything, for leaving, for lying, for betraying our marriage, for believing that a man who was cheating on his own wife could offer her anything genuine. She admitted that she had been stupid and selfish and asked if there was any chance we could work things out. I listened to her confession and apology with the same calm attention I had given to her original announcement about finding herself. When she finished speaking, I thanked her for her honesty and told her that I appreciated her willingness to acknowledge her mistakes. Then I explained that her journey of self-discovery had been more successful than she realized. She had indeed found her authentic self, someone who was willing to abandon her marriage based on the manipulation of a married man who made a career out of exploiting vulnerable people. She had discovered that she was capable of lying to her husband for months while planning her exit strategy. She had learned that she was willing to help destroy another family in pursuit of her own happiness. I told her that this authentic self she had discovered was not someone I was interested in being married to. Her self-actualization had been complete, and she was free to continue exploring who she was without the limitations of our marriage holding her back. She broke down again, insisting that she wasn't really that person, that she had been manipulated and confused, that the man she had trusted had taken advantage of her vulnerability. I acknowledged that he had certainly been manipulative, but reminded her that she had been a willing participant in every decision that had led to this moment. The conversation ended with her asking what she was supposed to do now. I suggested that she might want to consider actual therapy with a licensed professional who maintained appropriate boundaries with their clients. I also mentioned that she should probably start looking for a more permanent living situation, as I would be filing for divorce the following week. Update 1. The divorce proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. My wife had little leverage to negotiate, given the documented evidence of her affair and her voluntary abandonment of our marriage. She couldn't afford a lawyer and was forced to represent herself against the attorney I had hired. Her former life coach's situation continued to deteriorate. The state licensing board had suspended his credentials pending a full investigation. 3 more former clients had come forward with complaints of inappropriate relationships. His wife's divorce attorney had frozen his assets and was seeking substantial alimony and child support payments. The local newspaper ran a follow-up story about the investigation, including interviews with several of his victims. The pattern was always the same. He would identify women in vulnerable marriages, convince them that their husbands were preventing their personal growth, and then position himself as the solution to their problems. My wife had been just one in a long line of clients he had manipulated. She called me after the article was published, crying about how humiliated she felt to be associated with such a scandal. I reminded her that her association with the scandal was entirely voluntary and that she might want to focus her energy on rebuilding her life rather than lamenting the consequences of her choices. Update 2. 6 months after her departure, our divorce was finalized. She had moved in with a roommate across town and was working full-time at a retail job while trying to rebuild her credit and her reputation. The art therapy center had let her go after the newspaper coverage made her association with their practice problematic. Her former life coach had left town after his wife received a substantial settlement in their divorce. His practice had closed, and he was reportedly working at a gym in another state while dealing with ongoing legal issues related to his professional misconduct. His ex-wife had primary custody of their children and had reverted to her maiden name. I received one final call from my ex-wife on the anniversary of her original announcement about finding herself. She wanted to thank me for handling everything with such dignity and to apologize again for the pain she had caused. She said she had learned a lot about herself over the past year, though probably not in the way she had originally intended. She admitted that she now understood the difference between authentic self-discovery and the kind of selfish rationalization that destroys everything good in your life. She had started seeing a real therapist and was working on understanding why she had been so susceptible to manipulation and why she had been willing to throw away a good marriage for the promise of something more exciting. I wished her well in her continued journey of self-discovery and ended the call. Her year-long adventure in finding herself had cost her our marriage, her financial security, her professional reputation, and most of her friendships. But she had indeed discovered who she really was when faced with temptation and difficult choices. As for me, I had learned something important too. I discovered that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, that I could handle betrayal and abandonment without losing my dignity or my sense of humor. I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their actions without interference. The house felt different now, not empty, but peaceful. I had started dating again and was surprised to find how much I enjoyed the company of women who were genuinely interested in building something together rather than escaping from something else. My ex-wife's departure had forced me to rediscover parts of myself that I had neglected during our marriage. Sometimes I wonder if she ever found what she was looking for when she decided she needed to find herself. Based on our conversations, it seems like she discovered more about herself than she had bargained for, and most of it wasn't particularly flattering. But perhaps that kind of harsh self-awareness was exactly what she needed to eventually become a better person. The irony of the entire situation never escaped me. She had left our marriage to find herself with the help of a man who was simultaneously destroying his own family while pretending to help others. They had both discovered their authentic selves through their choices. She learned she was capable of selfishness and betrayal, and he learned he was a predator who exploited vulnerable people for his own gratification. My contribution to their journey of self-discovery had been minimal, just a carefully curated care package that allowed the truth to surface. Everything that followed had been the natural result of their own actions finally catching up with them. Sometimes the best thing you can do for people who are determined to make terrible decisions is simply to step aside and let them experience the full consequences of their choices. In the end, we all found exactly what we were looking for. If you like the story, please subscribe us and do like this video.